With that, if you're dialed in by phone, but you've not joined us in your reminder email from Allie Walker, because of the webinar participants, we have the phone line muted. Type in the chat window. He may answer a question during his presentation, but we'll hold most questions to the end of the webinar. Q&A. If you have technical difficulties at any point during the webinar, you can note it in the chat window, as Shannon has to help you get it sorted out if it's something that's individual to you. The private chat will show up as a new tab to the right of your screen. So it'll flash red once the private chat has been initiated by BALLE. So Shannon, I think since you're having some, but for other folks it sounds good, it's probably your line. And I'll suggest that maybe you hang up and dial back in, and Allie, maybe you can chat with additional follow-up instructions on the sound quality. So after each webinar, we will email everyone registered along with presentation slides and a copy of the questions from the chat. So you can watch for those materials in an email. So our Local First webinar series features innovative strategies at the level of individual businesses that effectively make the case for local and result in more buying and thinking local first. Each webinar is focused on you can take home and try out right away. Right now, as you know, we're doing a deep dive on local procurement as the next generation work. In the United States, as much as 6% of GDP comes from the spending of just two kinds of anchor institutions and higher education. So our consumer-focused local first work is still critically important, but consumers are only a portion of the potential hundreds of millions of dollars in buying power we can redirect to local enterprises. Our aim is to advance local purchasing and procurement as part of a city's economic development strategy, creating more jobs and community services by localizing goods and services. All of these things purchased by local county and state agencies, large businesses, and anchor institutions like hospitals and universities. At the same time, we know that most of us don't take on new program areas lightly. So while we design each of our webinars as a standalone resource, we're building a set of tools and trainings to help our community begin to do this work more. So today marks our third example, moving from Phoenix to Cleveland and now Detroit, of the impact of local procurement and the steps and challenges from cities that are trying this out. In February and March, we'll take a step back from any one example, and we're going to go deeper to do this work, from strategy development to strategic partnerships that can bring anchors to the table, to a financial and fundraising, to the nuts and bolts, tools and skills you'll need once you get going. We're also going to be doing a half-a-day workshop as part of our in Buffalo this June, and we'll be continuing to build other resources in this vein. So whether you come to every webinar or you take just bite-sized pieces from any one offering, we welcome you to be in this exploration with us. You treat our webinars as an opportunity to bring together a group of folks in your community who are interested in the topic. Maybe bring anchors you might have a relationship with, or fellow business owners. After listening to the webinar, you spend an hour, and to leverage the impact of our webinars, we don't ever charge extra per attendee on the same webinar line. Our upcoming webinars on our website, bealocalist.org. So with that, since we troubleshooting right at the top of the hour, I am going to skip my typical introduction of our speaker because David, I know, for himself in our presentation. So David, I'm pulling up your slides, and I am going to turn the floor over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is David Barna. I'm calling from Detroit, and I hope everybody's doing well, and their new year is off to a good start. So we're going to get rolling here. And I apologize in advance. I'm actually getting over a cold, so bear with me, and we'll get through this.
Are you still there, David?
I'm going through it now. Okay.
Got it.
So as an intro, how I got involved in this work, a program called Detroit Revitalization Fellows, and that's funded by three foundations, Weber and Skillman, and it's administered by Wayne State University, and it's basically a presidential management program, and it's early to mid-career professionals. Age range is 25 to 42. Most of us have a 2-year commitment that includes full-time employment, monthly professional development seminars, site visits to other cities. And I am part of the first cohort, and fellows placed at 18 organizations here in Detroit. The basic background of Source Detroit is that it is an anchor institution-based procurement initiative. So in Midtown, we have 3 anchor institutions. We have Detroit Medical Center, Henry Ford Health System, and Wayne State University. The goal is really to just increase anchor spending with Detroit-based businesses. Now, for the businesses, not the greater Metro Detroit area that some people may be familiar with, that suburbs and Oakland County and Macomb County and all that, just the city of Detroit. And the groundwork in 2010 by U3 Ventures, which is a urban planning, economic development consulting firm out of Philadelphia. We're primarily funded by the Living Cities Integration Initiative, and in Detroit, the Living Cities Integration Corridor Initiative, and it's the Source Detroit program is part of the anchor strategy, which is a So here on this diagram is kind of a simplified version of how this works. At the top, then we have the WCI. WCI is housed at Midtown Detroit Inc., and then we have the anchor strategy, and my local portion of the anchor strategy is called Source Detroit. So here's kind of a relationship diagram of how things work. So we have Source Detroit, we have our anchor institutions, which are Wayne State, Henry Ford, and DMC. Then we have our program partners, Midtown Detroit Inc., Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, U3 Ventures. And then we have our Detroit businesses and our business support organizations. And the business support organizations just run the gamut from, some of the stuff we do in-house to organizations like the SBA and MISB, TDC, the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. It really is pretty expansive. So what is Midtown Detroit Inc.? So Midtown Detroit Inc. is a nonprofit planning and development organization that supports the physical maintenance and revitalization of the Midtown Detroit area, public awareness, appreciation, and use of the district. We're basically a community and economic development organization, sort of like a super CDC, if you know what a CDC is. So in Midtown, we have the 3 major anchor institutions, which again are Wayne State, Henry Ford, and DMC. Now you might be wondering where exactly in Midtown, or where exactly in Detroit is Midtown. If you see this map, the black outline is the city of Detroit, and the area inside the red circle, that blue area, that is Midtown. If you look at the orange area, that is downtown. So we're kind of adjacent to downtown and sort of from the central business district. So kind of unpack. So Wayne State University is a large public research university with 32,000 students. They have 100 buildings, about 200 acres of geographic footprint. We have Henry Ford Health System, which is a hospital group, and their flagship main hospital is Henry Ford Hospital. I was actually born there. They have 802 beds at their Detroit campus, over 10,000 employees in Detroit alone. They have 4 other hospitals in the system. They're not-for-profit. Detroit has a hospital complex in Detroit. They have other facilities outside of Detroit in the greater metro area. They have about 2,000 licensed beds system-wide, 12,000 employees system-wide, and they're a private private for-profit corporation. They were actually bought out years ago by a private hospital group called Vanguard Health. So that's why they are private. So this map, I apologize for the coloring. This is the best map that I could find of the Midtown District. So this is kind of a down into the Midtown District, and you can see the 3 areas on there. So you can see where they're located and get a rough idea of the proximity they are to each other. And it just kind of shows that kind of the reason why Midtown is what it is due to these anchor institutions. Just a quick background for people who may not be super familiar with Detroit. Detroit population over time, it kind of went up and down. So in 1950, we had 1.8 million people. And in 1950, we were down to 1 million. In the year 2000, we were at about 950,000. And since the last we're down to 713,000 people. So a lot of people have left Detroit over the years, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I just want to make you aware of kind of the background and what we're dealing with here in the city. So a lot of people that left Detroit went to the suburbs. So this is a map that shows part of and Macomb County, and Detroit is in Wayne County, and people just kind of went out from the suburban areas. And the main reason why that's relevant is because as people left, businesses also left. And as businesses left, it actually led to a decrease in business activity. And that's sort of what we're trying to rebuild here with this project. And just as a background, in the Tri-County area, which people colloquially refer to as Metro Detroit, there are about 1.7 million people. But then again, in the actual city of Detroit boundaries, we've only got a little over 700,000. So it kind of gives you an idea of the compare and contrast. So what is procurement? Procurement, that's what it is. Acquisitions of goods and services, favorable that the goods and services are appropriate, that they are procured at the best possible cost to meet the needs in terms of quality and quantity, time, and location. And that's from Wheel, and he's a supply chain manager. It's the way that institutions get the goods and services that they need, whether it's a hospital, or a corporation. So this is large-scale purchasing. It's not like, we go to the grocery store or you go to Culver Costco and stock up. It's a much larger scale. So what are the trends in institutional procurement? The trends for a long time have been multi-year long-term contracts. So 3 to 3.5 year contracts, very routine. 5-year contracts are not uncommon at all. 10-year contracts are there. Things like laundry. I mean, a 10-year contract is very routine. Strategic sourcing and supplier consolidation. Basically, the idea is to get your list of suppliers for a particular commodity or service so that you can buy more from a smaller number of suppliers, leverage economies of scale, get the price down. And that's really been the trend, and it's becoming more and more a trend, and it can help or hurt us when we're in local purchasing. And then the other thing are group purchasing organizations, and pretty much every single hospital in the nation is a member of a group purchasing organization. It's where the GPO actually gets together and finds a vendor for maybe the entire of their members, and that vendor serves them all. So it really can take a bite out of the. In some cases, up to 80% of an institution's spend at a medical institution. So that right there is something we don't have a lot of leeway on, but we have to look at what's not in the GPO spend. So the scale of what our Midtown anchors are buying, $6 billion annually on operational expenses alone, and that approximate number is from back in 2010, so now it's probably higher. It does not include construction or capital-related spend. And when the original 2010 study was done by U3 Ventures, the consulting firm, they found that together, on average, the three anchors are only spending about 4.5% of their operational spending. So again, the point of the program was to try to move the needle on that and get the Detroit spend up. Now, what do by Detroit-based businesses? So we don't have a certification. It's really on a case-by-case basis. We look for substantial presence in Detroit. So we're looking for businesses that have made a real investment in Detroit. They're doing real work out of Detroit. They pay Detroit business taxes. They pay Detroit payroll taxes. They're not just trying to game the system with a P.O. box or, they have to be a real Detroit business. So with this slide, sort of trying to explain that the use of what we consider a Detroit business may be a little more expansive than the definition of a local business from the BALLE perspective. So here's some examples. So yes, we consider this a local business, a large independently owned headquarters and primary operations in Detroit, an institutional lighting manufacturer that manufactures products in Detroit and and then here's where it gets more expansive. A multinational accounting firm that owns a building in Detroit and 400 people in Detroit. So that may not be a homegrown Detroit business, but it's contributing enough of a substantial presence in Detroit where we would consider that Detroit spend over a different accounting firm that has no Detroit presence at all in Detroit, and all their operations are out of state. Independently owned Detroit branch of a national industrial would be considered a Detroit business. And then the other thing are businesses that partner with national companies. So an logistics and delivery firm that often partners with a multinational office supply company. So definite no's are a 3-person sales office where all the work is taking place somewhere else, an e-commerce website that has 2 people and the orders are all going to a non-local supply warehouse, a mobile equipment repair business that parks their truck in Detroit when they're working with a specific client, or somebody who's just got a P.O. box. We don't consider those things Detroit businesses. So why are we concerned about Detroit and not the Metro Detroit suburban areas? So we're trying to concentrate investment through the procurement spend. We're trying to reverse the migration of businesses from the city to the suburbs. We're trying to keep the businesses that are in Detroit open, especially those that have lost clients and work over the years. And that's a major concern because in many cases, a lot of businesses are only staying in Detroit because of their Detroit-based clients. Businesses have a lot of challenges being located in Detroit. They have to deal with things like security, basic city services, and things that have declined over the years as the Detroit population has declined and the tax base has declined, and therefore the city services are not as good. So, we're trying to keep what we have. And we want to grow businesses that are here in Detroit and, at the end of the day, jobs. So some examples of Detroit businesses. So we have an independently owned janitorial supply company, and they serve large institutions, Wayne State clients. We have Inland Press, which is the largest and oldest printing house in Detroit. They do printing on a very large scale, but they are a Detroit business. Milano Bakery is a bakery in Detroit, in Eastern Market, that used to do a lot of work for a major grocery chain. They used to supply to a major grocery chain, and that grocery chain shut down, and they lost a lot of clients. So we were able to help them kind of get things going to replace some of the clientele that they lost. Atlas Plumbing, that's a plumbing supply company, like seafood and meats, meat and seafood distribution company that's been around in Detroit for many, many years. So how do we find vendors? We start with existing resources. So Growth Corporation had a vetted list of businesses. We had a list from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We looked at anchor spend reports to see what vendors one anchor was using, and maybe there was some potential for another anchor to also use that vendor. And then over time, through our commodity group and RFP activity, we built up our own internal list of vendors for a certain type of commodity or service. And these RFP documents, if you can get a hold of them, the ones that are public or the ones that you're able to access, everything from the sign-in sheets to who actually bids, those are a very, very, very rich source of information and can really tell you a lot about who's bidding on contracts, who's winning the contracts, and what local vendors you have here in Detroit that you may not even be aware of. We have an annual trade fair, which is hosted by Wayne State University, and the format is that vendors speak directly to buyers. So we don't have a situation where 100 vendors are lined up to talk to one person from each institution, and it's just a supplier diversity representative, and they give out a business card, and they're saying, hey, call this number and make an appointment. We don't do that. So we have the actual buyers for the things that are being bought. Vendors talk to those buyers for that area of good or service that they're selling, and we want the discussion to occur to see if anything is really coming down the pipeline in terms of is there something that's coming up for bid soon, or is there a need that's coming up in the next 6 to 12 months? What's going on there? Is there an opportunity that a vendor can sort of prime themselves for and get ready for, so it's on their radar, so they can get their game plan together and be ready to bid on that when it comes out? A Detroit vendor database, that is an ongoing project. We're working in partnership with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, and they're working in partnership with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and they've actually launched a site called PureMichiganB2B.com, and that is a statewide site, Detroit-based portal that is in the works, and that's something that's still under development, and it's going to take a while before that's really solid, but it's getting going. So, commodity groups. So, this was something that Ventures set up when they originally set up this program as part of the overall anchor strategy, and they worked directly with the chief procurement institutions to sort of look at areas where low-hanging fruit, where there was something where spend could easily be in the short term. And the initial commodity groups were food, facilities, supplies, waste management, and print. And those were suggested by the chief procurement officers, and we had some movement in those areas. But it's important to note that this is, and it's something that needs to be done and needed to be done, but it is not a long-term strategy, because most procurement activity is RFPs, so multi-year contracts that only go out for bid when they expire. So this is absolutely true for commodities and services, and it's not like construction or capital spend, because project basis or an immediate need that needs to be met. And those things still do go out for bid, but they go out for bid much more than your operational commodities and routine services. So what I tried to do, I tried to sort of kind of take things in an RFP demand-driven direction. So the first, don't have access to RFPs, they can't bid on them. Simple as that. The vendor needs to know about it. And some vendors, may have had a contract or may have done some work for one of the anchors 5 years ago, and then that was over, and their focus was really on other clientele, and they haven't even really thought about what those institutions are doing and what they're putting out for bid. So to kind of rebuild those relationships and get the anchors, so that when those bid opportunities come out, they can look at that as a business opportunity and really think about and hopefully bid on it and win the contract. So I actually checked the websites where the public RFPs, and I send out RFPs to my vendor list that I've built up. And the institutions, they have their internal listservs, and many vendors are subscribed to them. This is sort of a reminder, because employees change, things change. The listserv may have sent out a large PDF attachment, box, so anything we can do to make sure that people are getting an extra reminder that, hey, here's a bid opportunity. Take a look at this. Think about going to the pre-bid meeting. Think about bidding on this contract. We're trying to get more business for Detroit-based businesses. We've actually gotten a lot of feedback from vendors that says that they really appreciate it, or they would not have known about this bid opportunity for me sending it out to them. So this is something that we know has value. In one case, a construction won a $2 million contract, and they would not have even known about it had we not sent it out to them. So that's important. Some RFPs are invite only, so those are not posted publicly, and we cannot get those. So at the very least, we need to make sure that as we're identifying vendors that are signing up to register as a vendor for basic background check and just get in the system, so that they can get those invite-only RFPs. And if they don't sign up, again, they can't. That's why we need to do that. The other thing that has been a bit of a challenge is forecasting. So knowing about an RFP before it comes out, not to necessarily send it out, because you can't do that, because all institutions have their own purchasing regulations, and that would go against it. But next 6 months, we're going to be putting together an RFP for X, so keep an eye out for it. Or in the next year, keep an eye out for it. That's important for us to know, because that gives us more time to sort of dig out what local if there's a joint venture relationship that somebody wants to explore for that. Or if there's any recommendation at all that we could make on the scope or terms of the RFP, and it's something that if it's an option, we want to be there. So one recommendation we made was there was a recent food management contract RFP that went out for one of our anchors. Okay, see what you can do about local sourcing of food and make some sort of requirement. And so they were able to do that, and the amount wasn't a lot, but it's something, and it's getting them, the vendors that they're working with, especially the larger vendors that are going to have to sub out stuff, to really think about impact local purchasing. So how do we know a particular... Okay, I'll try to get through this. So how do we know if a particular vendor has the capacity to serve an anchor institution? Some basic indicators are annual revenue, current clientele, number of employees. Annual revenue, current clientele is probably the best indicator, but it's not always easy to figure that out. So annual revenue is really the thing that we have access to through existing resources like Dun & Bradstreet or Harris Connect or any of these business things that are national, like Reference USA or whatever. And what we found through experience is that in annual revenue, they have likely institutional capacity. If they're 500K to 1 million, probably institutional capacity. 250K to 500K, that's the gray area, but we still find a lot of gems in there. 150K, definitely outliers. The ones that are the outliers are like your independent graphic design firms, web designer types, and things of that nature. But most generally, if you're below that level of revenue, you're just not at the scale to serve and a large institution. So right now, the key component to Source Detroit, so we rely on matchmaking and showing institutions that Detroit-based vendors can compete on services. So the program results. So right now, we've got about $16.5 million in known transfers to Detroit-based businesses. And what I mean by that are things that we know about, because unfortunately, in the midst of this program, is that our 3 anchor institutions all upgraded their enterprise-level e-procurement systems. So it became some of the spend reporting, and we haven't been able to do all that, get all that spend reporting and get it audited and evaluated. We can really get an accurate number and see how much we really move the needle. But this is what we know about from either anchors or from the vendors themselves, or public announcements, and so this is what we know. And so here are just some examples of the things that we've had as successes. So now we're getting into, you want to start a local procurement initiative. What are some things that you need to keep in mind? So on a very, very basic level, it's important to anchors to commit to increasing local spend. And then your job is to provide support to help the anchors accomplish this. It's the most basic thing that you need to know that is fundamental to doing this type of work. So timing. Is the timing right for this? Is there some groundwork that needs to be laid? Are there big institutional changes on the horizon that may make implementation challenging? Mergers, new CEOs coming in, reorganization, that sort of thing. Program partners. So anchors need to be the strongest driving force of all this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's absolutely necessary for long-term sustainability. You're coordinating and supporting organizations. Their motivational patterns really need to be in. So if you have a situation where you have 2 organizations that are trying to partner up on this, and they're on different grants with different clients, for sort of the same, but not really the same thing, that can create an issue. Funders there needs to be a long-term funding commitment. This isn't something that's just going to be self-running in 2 years when a grant cycle ends. I mean, this is a long-term view, but it's something that's really important, and so that's why you need that. So anchors of businesses, they're really just looking for the cheapest and most efficient way to get what they need to operate. If anchors request, as you're working with them trying to support this type of work, you need to handle that in a reasonable time frame. In the community development, urban planning world, a lot of us are kind of used to the slow pace of things, and that's really not going to work when you're dealing with anchors, because it's really quick. Anything that's going to be putting a huge burden on staff is not going to last long, and they really just need assurance that buying local will not cause the spend to cascade out of control, that there are buyers that can be competitive on service and price. So these are just some things getting into the mindset of the buyers. So procurement departments are often staffed very, very leanly. Buyers are under a lot of pressure to meet very tight budgets. They don't like change. They may not feel a close connection to the local community. They may not live in your local urban area. You may be way out somewhere else. They may not see a benefit. They may not see the difference. They may have had some past bad experiences and formed some negative stereotypes about local vendors in general based on some specific instances. They may be accustomed to keeping things close to the vest without site interference. I think that is across the board. They often have long relationships that date back many years with certain vendors, so they don't want to drop those vendors. And price, service, and institutional purchasing policies, that's what's really driving them. And you get over these things by building a top-down program that starts with the CEOs and your board, and keeping them involved throughout the program's progress so this stays at the top of their to-do list. And you need to figure out ways to reduce the burden on buyers so that they don't push back, and this doesn't create more work for them. So you need to keep your supplier pipeline going. So you want to make your gray area suppliers more competitive for institutional level work to the extent possible, and that's really something you have to do on a daily basis with the individual vendors and what resources are available to them in your local community. You want to in a local vendor supply chain where no local supplier exists. Can the anchor buying power be used as businesses? I think we've seen some examples of that with the Cardinal Health deal with Henry Ford and DMC. And you need to be, in some cases the business is just not going to be able to ramp up to scale even in the next several years. Customer-oriented business or retail-oriented business that are just not at the institutional level, and your business support organizations are very critical. So for a vendor database, easy to use, more utility than existing resources. With the development of that, buyer input needs to be taken into account. They're going to be the ones using it, so they got to say in the specs. You want to keep vendor information accurate and up to date. You want to be sure that's getting updated once a year with reminder emails. Registration is done. And you want integration capabilities, ideally, with institutional procurement and accounting software. Things are seamless, and ideally you're tracking spend in real time, and you want to consolidate the bid to the extent possible. So major advice, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at what other communities have done, whether it's Cleveland, Philadelphia, Miami-Dade College has an incredible SLBE program, that small and local business enterprise program. I think it's really at the forefront of this type of work and is a model that all of us can aspire to. New York City Small Business Services, they're doing some amazing things with capital and bonding assistance. And in Texas, a trade organization has a fantastic construction mentorship program that I think is unbelievable, and everybody should really be looking at that. And your minority and women business enterprise programs are really a precursor to all this. And everything that we're trying to do, they've been through. So they're a source of resources and advice, and don't discount them, even though we're talking about something a little different. And keep in mind there's overlap, where you're at. A lot of your local businesses may be minority businesses. That's especially true of Detroit, but it's also true of many urban areas. Okay, so basically you want to move towards policies and procedures, and that's really key for long-term success and sustainability. That's one of the primary goals of the program, and we mean, by policy, we mean it's a mechanism that local spend increases over time from an individual institutional level, and that really needs to be tailored to the individual institution. It really is a local vendor preference system in the bidding process. That's what we're talking about. So for this discussion, I have some links, and we can get the Q&A started whenever Alyssa is ready.
All right, thank you so much, David. I let us run over a little bit because I knew that you had really, really good suggestions I wanted to get to. and the questions weren't as yet pouring in the chat window. So I'm going to start with a question that actually was sent to me via text from somebody who's on the phone line but not in the webinar room. And she said, David, did Midtown Detroit bring you in specifically to develop this program, and what sort of expertise is needed to do your work? And so I think what's behind this is organizations are imagining that, starting to imagine how they would take this on. And they're wondering, can I just build up my expertise with a bit of training? Do I need to bring somebody in? So talk a little bit about that. Were you brought in specifically to do this, or, how did that happen? We know that there's the fellowship piece of it. And then what kind of expertise is needed, or have you developed, do you think?
Okay, so to be clear, the program was set up over a year before I was brought on. So it was set up during 2009, 2010, and I didn't come on to the fellowship until fall 2011. Now I'm the program manager for the program after it transitioned out of the consultants doing the setup and sort of doing that groundwork. But I also had to develop strategies to move the program forward and to get it moving. So I guess the answer is yes and no. So they bring me in specifically to work on this. I mean, this was the position that I was applying for through the fellowship. We had to apply for specific jobs. It wasn't something where it's just like, okay, you're a fellow and now we just assign you wherever. It doesn't work like that. And I don't want to spend too much time on the fellowship piece of it. But as far as expertise, I think it would really depend on what scale you're trying to do this at and how things work now on this particular program is that I'm the only full-time employee on this program. And I think that long-term, you're probably going to want more than one person working on this full-time. And expertise, there are different levels of that. So I did not have a background in procurement when I joined. I knew a little bit about government contracting through some internship work I had done in law school, but I did not have a specific supply chain management or procurement background. So anybody doing this is going to have to learn a lot on their own. This is really not something that you can just bring somebody in who's already an expert, but you need to be looking at what other communities are doing. And if I had the budget and everything else to really staff something like this up, and we're thinking about doing it, I would be looking to bring at least one person on with a supply chain background, particularly somebody who has worked on implementation of either another buy local program or some kind of minority and women business-owned program, like somebody who's actually worked with that at a policy level. That's just my personal opinion.
Great. I'm struck that in our world, a lot of the local first consumer-focused work that the folks on the call have done, they kind of invented as they went along and just shared information across communities and didn't necessarily have training in that, and yet have had great success. And we're in a place here now where there's enough communities that have started it that there's some good learning. So we've had a couple more questions come in. I am going to start with a question from Lark that says, since you were just referencing there was like a phase 1 with a consultant and a phase 2 where your fellowship started, kind of thinking back to that phase 1, how did these relationships with the anchors get started in the first place? So, how does one begin to think about, who to talk to, which institutions, but then also, you mentioned that CEOs or CFOs are the best resource. Do you just call them up on the phone? Like, how do you begin that relationship development program?
Right. Well, the way it was done in Detroit is that how we pick the institutions those are the anchor institutions in Midtown. There are no other eds and meds in Midtown, with the exception of the College for Creative Studies, which is a very small private art college. So they really weren't at the same scale to where they felt like this was something that they wanted to do. And so geographically, that was what we had, right? And because of the work that Midtown Detroit Inc. had been doing for many, many years, the organization existed in a previous incarnation dating back like 25 years. So relations had been built up with those anchors from a placemaking, urban planning, and real estate development perspective. So it was really easy for them to get the ear of the right people, to be able to have access to the CEOs and to be able to handle that. And essentially, what happened is the consulting firm created a pitch, and the Living Cities opportunity came up, and it was sort of a multi-level pitch because it had to be pitched to the local foundations, it had to be pitched to Living Cities, and it had to be pitched to the CEOs. So it was really sort of that's just how things work, And in another community, that may look differently, but you at least want to have some sort of baseline relationship with the CEOs or somebody who has access to those CEOs or some kind of intermediary if you don't already have an existing relationship. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very hard to do this. And, this may not be something you want to bring up when you're meeting somebody for the first time. And when you do bring it up, your one pitch is probably all you're going to get. So you need to make sure that that's really tight and it looks like it makes sense, and you're building on the knowledge base of what other people have done. And from there, after that first pitch, then you can go into, a more detailed conversation about, okay, is this something that we could maybe do, and do we want to do this, But those first steps, those really have to be taken.
Thank you. And one of the things we're going to be exploring in February and March is the role of place-based funders like community foundations and other grassroots funders in both bringing anchors to the table. They can be, in kind of brokering those relationships and in funding the work as one strategy for both setting yourselves up, developing strategy, getting the attention of the right folks, and ultimately funding the work, among other strategies. But that's very helpful to hear your perspective there, David, too. You mentioned that you send RFP emails and out to a list, and that, sending reminders, just letting folks, forecasting wherever you can and sending reminders is really important. Give us a sense of how often you do that. Are you talking about 300 or are you talking about 3 a year?
No, it's hard to quantify. I don't know an exact number, but I'm checking the websites where those are publicly posted. Again, not all of them are publicly posted, and not all of them are publicly available. But, for example, with Wayne State University, they're a public university, and their institutional procurement policies state that everything's got to go out for public bid if it's anything over $20,000. So I check their website every day, and if I get an RFP, and in some cases over the summer when they were doing a lot of construction, maintenance, repair, and operation work, kind of upgrading old buildings to new classrooms and renovating parking garages, I was getting like 6 or 7 RFPs a week. And as soon as I get my hands on those, I don't send them out to a mass mail listserv of all the vendors ever in Detroit. Those are targeted. So if I know that there are like 4 or 5 construction companies that can handle this parking garage renovation, I only send it to those 5. I don't send it to everybody because they don't need it. I only send it to the people who can do the work and who are going to be interested in this type of work. It's within their scope.
Great, and we had a question just to that. And by the way, we've got maybe 4 or 5 questions in the queue and about 8 minutes left. So we'll try to move through these well, but a bit at a clip if we can. So to follow up, since you're you're kind of targeting who gets what. You mentioned the critical role of business support organizations in working with you to help the vendors become qualified to credibly respond to RFPs. So talk a little bit more about that. What do you do in terms of support and education? What other support and education organizations do you link up with? How much is needed in terms of vendor support to help people become qualified? Or have you found there's a bunch of folks that were already ready to go, that were already there?
Right. So in Detroit, the situation with the vendors that we're dealing with, in most cases, the vendors that I deal with are already qualified. They don't need to be told how to put together an RFP. They just need to know that there's an RFP out there. They just need to be made aware of the bid opportunity and have the opportunity to bid on it. And, they've been doing this for a long time. They're experts in their own area of whatever it is, whether it's janitorial supplies or construction or food distribution or whatever it is. And so they handle it. I don't need to help them. The classes on how to put together RFPs and stuff like that, we don't administer those ourselves. We don't really deal with that so much. We refer people to business support organizations like MISB-TDC, the Detroit Regional Chamber, the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, Tech Town, things like that. The resources that we have available, MMSTC, which is the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, SEED, which is the Women Business Minority Group. We refer them to those where appropriate, but the vast majority of the vendors that I'm dealing with are ready to go. In some cases, and in a few cases, there have been situations where I can see that there's a potential joint relationship with two vendors. And so I'll just make a suggestion like, hey, you guys, why don't you talk to each other and you work this out? Maybe there's something there, maybe there's not, but you guys are the experts. I'm just connecting the people, right? So does that answer your question?
I think so. It was a couple of folks asked that, and I think that's very helpful to hear and understand.
Some businesses are just not at the level where they can compete institutionally. And you don't want to spend too much time on spinning your wheels with those businesses because you're going to get frustrated. And so you really need to focus on businesses that are ready or very close to being ready.
And I know you've said offline, and I want to move to the next question now, but just as a footnote to that, I know you've said how surprised that folks in this work in Detroit were at how many institutional scale businesses there were in Detroit ready to have procurement shifted to them that the average person had never heard of.
Right, absolutely.
So I popped us back to the slide with your program results where you show of the $16.5 million in known transfers, some examples of where that's gone. And we had Terry flag that the last bullet here, that $1,000 in produce purchase from local Detroit gardens. We know there's a lot happening with local food production in Detroit. So he says that seems like a small amount. Could you grow by connecting with the greening of Detroit as a vendor?
That's an interesting question. I mean, one of the barriers is that institutional farming isn't quite 100% legitimized yet. City Council is working on that, and I think they did pass a bill recently that's going to allow some rezoning, but all the details are not hammered out yet. So the scale is really just not there. That was just something that was available, and I don't want to say it's a one-off, but it was something that was available there. And I think that, in the future, that's definitely a growth area. But one of the challenges is that there's safety certifications. So food's got to be traceable, especially with these institutions. So there's GAP and HACCP certification, and that's really not my area, but I know from working with Eastern Market that food producers, especially with produce, that's all got to be set up in order for them to do larger transactions with large institutions. And so we're actually working with Eastern Market on a program where Michigan produce gets funneled through a Detroit distribution company, and the institutions actually place online orders to an e-commerce system, and they buy them directly from the grower. So the Detroit distribution company in that case is only collecting a delivery fee, and the institution is doing business directly with the farmer in Michigan. And so that's been a huge accomplishment, even though it took a long time to get that going. And the quantities are still not up to the level where they could be, in the next year or two or 3 or 4. But the fact that they're doing it is huge. And I see that as a definite growth area, because the partners that they're working with are certified, so they can handle that. You know what I mean?
Thank you. I think that starts answering Matthew's question about food as well, and I'm going to leave it there given the time. I think we're likely to do a webinar and probably develop some other resources around food procurement in particular, because there's a lot that's happening and a lot that's possible. So I want to end with a final question here, and we've maybe got 45 seconds for an answer. So just kind of give us a sense. Where are the anchor spend reports available, David? Are they public, or do you have to get them from the procurement officers or something else?
They are absolutely not public. You have to get those from the procurement officers, and that's not just something they're going to turn over because you call them up one day and ask. So all the groundwork and relationships with the CEOs and the board and hey, this is something we want to explore, that's got to be done before you even get to that point. And spend reports are pretty unwieldy. They're pretty big, messy spreadsheets, and so you're going to need some auditing help to help synthesize and standardize and evaluate all that. It's not something you're going to probably be able to handle in-house.
Thank you. Well, it's helpful to understand again, we moved from Phoenix to Cleveland to Detroit. What can be accomplished in a couple of years? What are the opportunities and challenges and successes you've had? And then we're going to keep going deeper with future webinars and workshops. Let's take this on. But David, I know you spent quite a bit of time preparing for today. So we really, really appreciate your time. And I have a couple of closing reminders for folks. Remember, after each webinar, we'll email everyone registered a link to the call audio, materials, and a copy of the questions in the chat window. So watch for that from Allie Walker on our staff in the next day or two. Or you can buy them 3 at a time across any series for a significant savings. If you want to and you are a BALLE leader member, a champion member, or you're the local business member of a champion, we have affinity group. You can visit our website, bealocalist.org, to find out more about affinity groups to get joined up for ongoing conversation. Thank you for their terrific questions. And David, again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and I hope everybody feel free to follow up with me personally if you have any more questions.
Thank you. David has given us his follow-up materials. We are going to be including those in case folks want to contact David offline with additional questions. David, and Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year.